Now, Julian Assange is set to become a free man within hours after spending 5 years in a UK prison and 7 in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. The Wikileaks founder will plead guilty later this morning to violating US espionage law under a deal that would allow him to return home to Australia. Antony Loewenstein is an author and filmmaker who has been a Wikileaks supporter since 2006, and he joins us now from Sydney. Anthony, very big day. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael.
What do you make of developments over the last 24 hours?
Well, huge and necessary. I mean, the idea that the US was going to potentially prosecute a journalist for espionage was always something which disturbed me and a lot of other people, in fact millions around the world, not just because of Julian himself, of course, but also for the concept of press freedom, that if the US was able to successfully prosecute Assange in the US, it really was a chill on anyone who does serious investigative journalists. I mean, let's be clear, what Julian had been doing for years, from 2006 when Wikileaks began, was doing the work that many other journalists had also done in terms of investigative journalism, finding sources and releasing it. The difference was that WikiLeaks released, in my view and many others' view, more important documents about the state of the world, secrets, Iraq, Afghanistan, Guantanamo, Palestine, and pretty much any other news organisation in my adult life. And I think that's why so many people in the press and also governments often hated him, but also millions, of course, admired what he was standing for.
But in the end, he is pleading guilty to this single charge of breaching the US espionage law, which on face value is a pretty serious offence.
Look, he's pleading guilty. Obviously, I can't speak for Julian or his legal team for the decision behind that, but I think it's outrageous that essentially, I'm guessing he was told he had no choice to get his release, that the idea that the US was still demanding, after all these years, that doing journalism is akin to espionage is absurd and also dangerous. It has the potential of threatening other individuals or journalists in the US or elsewhere who do similar kind of work. I mean, what Assange had been doing in talking to Chelsea Manning, his former source, to get this vital information was more revealing about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan than pretty much any other journalism in the last 20 years about those wars. So I think it's disturbing. I understand why he had no choice to do so, but I think it says a lot about how the White House was still insisting that he did so.
OK, but there are still critics of Julian Assange out there, and as you know, he does polarise people and has done so over the last 14 years also, who say what he did in, as you say, publishing those documents put US lives at risk. What do you say to those arguments?
It's been said for years, and there's no evidence that actually is the case. The US itself, years after making that allegation, quietly released a report saying that in fact no US personnel were harmed, no individuals were harmed. And it's right that journalism redacts names from people if there's a risk to their life or their security. No one has any problem with that. But the fact is that Assange was accused of that, and indeed there was a massively, in some ways, successful smear campaign against Assange for years. But let's be clear here. There is bipartisan support in Australia to get him home. The majority of Australians, based on polling for years, have supported bringing him home. And I think it's revealing that there are still some, not in the media, both here and globally. I always saw it as jealousy, Michael, that people were jealous about the fact that Julian wasn't playing the game that so many journalists play of being close to power, politicians or business. He essentially was a bomb thrower. Not literally, of course, but metaphorically and journalistically, and revolutionised in some ways what journalism is. I mean, what WikiLeaks pioneered was the concept of transparent journalism, releasing information in the public interest, and now pretty much every serious news organisation, including here at the ABC, has something like a Dropbox where sources can deliver information, which is important. And I mean, Australia, sadly and outrageously, has a major problem with whistleblowers. I mean, just this year, David McBride, an Afghan war crimes revealer, essentially is serving time for detailing Afghan war crimes while people who actually killed Afghans, Australian soldiers, have not served time. So I think Australia still, including the current Labor government, has a real problem with accepting that whistleblowing is a key part of public debate.
OK, Julian Assange, if everything goes smoothly, could be back in Australia by tonight. Do you expect him to still keep playing the role of, as you put it, a figurative bomb thrower when he's back home?
Look, it's an impossible question to answer. I don't know. Obviously, his priority is his health. He's been in Belmarsh prison, maximum security prison in London for years. I very much hope WikiLeaks continues in some form, whether with him or otherwise, but I completely understand if he chooses to not continue that. But the bottom line is, whether it's WikiLeaks or something else, with Assange or with others, the role and the importance of organisations like that does not change. That we are drowning in misinformation these days in terms of lots of issues, from Palestine to Gaza to Sudan to a US election, and we need credible news organisation. There's a reason why so many in the public, when you ask them, do not trust us in the press. That's what a lot of people say, which is why we need credible journalists and media organisations, WikiLeaks or others, to fulfil that role.
Antony, appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.